Superintendent Fujitaki, board members. We're here tonight to talk about next technologies for learning. I brought with me tonight Andy Kubis, principal of Valley View Elementary, to talk a little bit later about some of the family supports at Valley View Elementary, and Nelson Madrid, who's one of our OEE advocates, who also works out of Valley View Middle School and works with the, has a unique connection with the Georgetown apartment complex, and so we wanted to talk about that as a pilot site within the Next Technologies for Learning effort. This is our third stop on the Next Technologies for Learning plan. Just a quick overview. We were here on I was here on February 25th, and we talked about the vision for Next Technologies for Learning, that it's building on some of the good work of our previous work in the classroom, personalizing learning, the three main components of this endeavor. On March 18th, we brought a team back that included Beth Anderson and Tim Anderson out of the Academic Services Office, myself and Tom Lee, principal of Olson Middle, to talk about the next layer of detail with the Next Technologies plan, the goals, the SMART goals around the plan, and budget items. The discussion that followed led to some questions, and then through email and some personal conversations, it seemed appropriate that we come back and dive a little more deeply into a couple of areas. I wanted to, let me fast forward. Oh, I'm missing a slide. I wanted to talk about, it's 5 areas. They should be in the slideshow that you have in front of you. The 5 areas that we wanted to look at a little more closely include communication. So it was suggested that we talk about, and I agree with, what are we doing to make sure we have good, solid communication about our technology initiatives. About internet access, another look at what are the approaches that we're taking to internet access. One of those very difficult problems to solve once students leave our buildings. Look at the current referendum spending, give a quick overview of how that current referendum money is being spent. How we're intending to support student, staff, and buildings, part of why these gentlemen are here. And then probably the best part of the evening for you, I'm sure, will be a hands-on tour of Chromebooks, looking at some of those things that we can do with a Chromebook that's in front of you, and examples of digital content. So I'll start here with communication. This slide is not in your packet because we added it last minute. We wanted to note that since 2007, we've had a technology article in every episode of School Pages, or every issue of School Pages. Since January, as we've pulled together this process, it's a rather large team. We've met with 20 constituency groups, including 4 community and parent groups. We've, in timing with our vision presentation to the board, there was a preview article in the InkSpot, the staff newsletter, which laid out the same vision. And then if you got the School Pages just this week, you saw a front page article in the corner giving the next layer of how technology can transform what we do. Coming up tomorrow night, I'm at Ridgeview with Katrina Mesra to talk to parents there. Steve Abramson, principal of Ridgeview, has laid some groundwork, started a conversation about what technology can do at Ridgeview, and he's invited us to come out and talk to the parents, answer some of their questions. We're doing something similar at Oak Grove Middle School, talking to their PTSA coming up. We have a student survey scheduled for this spring, so we can narrow in, I'll talk about that in a minute, narrow in on some of those access questions. We need to pinpoint some of the vagaries that are in our current data. So of these 5 topics, number 1 was communication, number 2 is about internet access. This is our baseline data for where we're starting with measuring internet access. We have 3 sources here. One of them on the right is just the straight Minnesota census. That is, in 2010, Minnesota residents reported at a 79% rate that they have internet access at home. We did a Bloomington survey, a student survey of our secondary students. We got over 1,000 participants among secondary students, and we found that 96% self-reported that they have regular internet access at home. And the community survey that was done this last fall by the Community Relations Department found that in our community, there is a 96% access rate. There is some vagueness around some of those questions. When you ask a question about do you have internet access at home, what we need to dig into a little more deeper is it the kind of internet access that could be used with a Chromebook? For instance, is it wireless, or is a student or a family member talking about their mom's computer that's in the office that can be used on occasion? So that's where we have to dig a little deeper. I think what this data tells us, though, is it gives us sort of the upper and lower bounds. 79%, between 4%, we think is the lower bound, and then the gap, 21%, then would be the upper bound, and somewhere in between is going to be our real value. What I've said, the way I've described it, is we need to start putting pins on a map so that we can see if those pins of access are concentrated in specific neighborhoods, if they're interspersed uniformly throughout neighborhoods, and then how can we address each of those concerns. In addition to the slideshow, included in the board materials was really our homework assignment, which was a deeper dive into internet access. So it's about a 5-page document. It outlines, among other things, the data that you've seen, makes the case for why digitizing content and providing access is an important part of the evolution of how we deliver education. And then it proposes these 5 strategies for addressing home internet access, and I'll just walk through them briefly. The first and lowest level strategy is really just a map. It is point to those places where students and community members can go for free internet access in our community. You can find an app on an iPhone or an Android device that points to these free internet access points. Some of them are student-friendly, some of them are not student-friendly. We would want to create something that's customized for our students. But what we need to do is provide for families a map as a first level strategy. Using existing school resources is that cooperative team effort that collaborates that harnesses the school's power to use their existing resources. We have media centers, we have staff that can oversee students who want to stay late, who want to have homework nights at certain times when they're appropriate, and so harnessing some of those existing resources is one of those strategies. Starting the conversation would be first, of course. Third is that mobile hotspots that I've talked about before. It's that little puck that you've seen. I had a personal experience as my Wi-Fi went out at my home this weekend, and so I happened to have the puck at home, and the Wisers went 2 days on a little Verizon puck, and we got by swimmingly, actually. The fourth strategy, and then around mobile Wi-Fi hotspots, the depth that we have budgeted is to put 170 of these Wi-Fi hotspots into buildings. That represents, if we consider the number of families in Bloomington Public Schools, it represents about 2.4% of our families. The practical case would be a student who doesn't have internet access at home could stop in at the media center because there is an important project, check out a puck for the night or 2 nights or a week, take it home, have internet access for that period of time, bring it back so that somebody else can. It would be like a shared resource, much like other things in the media center. That's a starting point, and it's also with our pilot device. It's the one we've got a proof of concept. It provides filtered internet as though the student is at school, and it's one of the more expensive solutions, but we've budgeted to do some significant work there, especially when you compare what some of our neighboring districts have done. The fourth strategy there is community partnerships. So what that looks like, approaching community members, those folks that are on the board in the back of the room here, and saying, would you welcome students coming to your place If we provided the Wi-Fi access, what supports would you need to help students get access in this space? I'm going to have Nelson talk a little bit about that in a minute. Since our last visit, we sent a team out to Georgetown Apartment Complex to have a further conversation about this. I couldn't attend, but we want to update you on how that first initial partnership pilot is looking. I did have a phone conversation with the networking guy from Hennepin County, the Hennepin County. And what we had was a conversation about county property inside the Bloomington city bounds, including the two libraries, the two Hennepin County libraries, and then a new facility that Hennepin County is building. The follow-up to that is we have a field trip planned to the Oxborough Library in about 3 weeks. We're going to talk about the capacity, what kind of how many students could show up there on a given day, what kind of internet capacity we could add to that facility to accommodate those students, talk to staff, look at their networking. They're very close proximity to Valley View Middle, so we can also help carry some of the load of that internet access, or that load we would be adding. And then the fifth strategy is this mesh network strategy. It's the most infrastructure-heavy strategy, and it's the USI Wireless. That's the company that created the Minneapolis Wi-Fi network. We've talked to those folks a couple times. We need to have them out again. But when we put those pins on a map and we look at the concentrations of where we need to solve this access problem, can we put up hotspots instead of putting individual pucks into apartment buildings? Can we put up Wi-Fi access points on poles outside that can cover a whole neighborhood? So that would be our fifth strategy. At this point, I'll turn it over to Nelson, and he can talk a little bit about this effort.
Hello, everybody. It's an honor to be here. Thank you very much for having us over. And my name is Nelson Madrid. I work for the OE department, and I also work with the building liaison at Valley View Middle. And I can tell you that I'm really honored to work with such a group of professionals, as well as the group of students I have the privilege to work with. I started last year working for OEE, so I've been in the Bloomington Public Schools for 2 years. But I was a graduate from Kennedy. I went to Kennedy, and I played soccer there and everything, so I am very familiar with the Bloomington Public Schools, and I'm very honored to be part of such a wonderful organization. First of all, last year, Dina asked me to work at Georgetown. This is how I came to become familiar with Georgetown. And I worked there. The program was Mentor in the Middle. And we worked with a big group of students. And there I found out when I was working, helping students with homework, different activities that we were bringing, such as leadership stuff. A lot of students approached me and said, we need computers. We need access to the internet. And then I started talking to Dina, and also talking to someone at Valley View too, about the opportunity to get in some computers and having some internet access there. Unfortunately, something went wrong with the apartments. Another apartment complex burned down, so the people had to move to that apartment complex. So the things didn't work out very well. I know this year there is someone else, the Michael's Lutheran Church, I think, is working there right now, which is they're doing the homework hangout part right now on Tuesdays, and I think it is Tuesdays from 6:30 to 8, which is a great place to be. I love to be there. The people that work there are awesome, and I think us having the pilot program that John was talking about, if we started there, it would be a great opportunity. First of all, I think they will have people. They will be supervised. The kids will be supervised. They'll have the access there. They can come over and hang out and do the homework. And I believe, for what I've spoken to John before, is that if there is a big enough crowd that needs more internet, I think we can talk. I spoke to Carmelisa about this, the Georgetown manager, and I said, what would be the chance for us to bring a device in here and have maybe the whole area of Georgetown be covered by a secure connection? And she said that would be a great thing. But starting somewhere, I think the access part is so key for this big project. we can start there. We need to start somewhere. And I think if we start having the kids coming over and if we see the number of students increasing, I think we can go somewhere. And I think the opportunity is there, and I think we can do it. And I just imagine myself, and being one of these students, or imagine helping some of these students who are going to be in a secure place. They're being supervised with a secure internet connection. I believe they would definitely take the opportunity. I don't think a lot of the students, what I know for the work I do with them, they know they have to do homework at school, and they stay after school, and this is why we have different programs after school, and we're very successful, because there's somebody there that teaches them how to do it. And I don't think that they have that at home. A lot of the students I've spoken with, they said there's probably a computer at home, but sometimes the parents don't let them use it. Why? Because only the adults can use it at home. So they need something that it is for them, that they can connect to, that the parents can trust. And if we say this is a ISD 271 connection, they will know that we are taking care of. Our name is into it, and they will see that their students are doing the work. I think it's something that it will be a great start. And, you know, a little bit sharing about myself and how the importance and how I see this as such an important part of our district is that when I was here for in school, in high school at Kennedy, I wish I would have had an opportunity like that. I wish having a place where I could go, use the internet, probably have my own laptop, it would have been so handy when I was in college. And the way things are changing nowadays is very different. And in college, you have to go sometimes to the libraries, sometimes you have to go to a different place in order to access the internet. And I think if we start there, just telling the kids, you come over in here, you do your homework, you hang out, you have internet access, you have a computer, you have everything that you need. What is on your way right now? I think if we can start there, if I would have had that, I would have been much more successful. I would have not been writing things on paper such as this, and then going back and typing in the computer. That would have made a big difference because I was working twice as hard as anybody was working. And now with submitting things online, the whole Google Documents, we have Moodle. I had no idea what that was about. And I think we now have that opportunity, and as the educators, and we can be pioneers into these, I believe. So I am full aware, I'm very confident that we can do it. I know there's going to be a lot of challenges, and the access piece is probably the biggest thing that there is, but I think we have a great group of professionals that can take care of this. Thank you.
Thanks, Nelson. Topic 3 that we wanted to dig a little deeper into was an overview of the budget. How is the current referendum budget being spent this year? This is an overview, and then how does that, then just a quick reiteration of the Next Technologies for Learning budget. So this budget, $2.7 million in revenue. It doesn't include the telephone system upgrade that we did, so that is out of this mix. That's a 1 in 10 year project, but of that $2.7 million in revenue, it's divided into these categories: replacement and infrastructure, including all the computers, the projection units, also all of that equipment throughout the district is that $1.7 million. Innovative classroom technology, let me go back a second. We try to target, when we set budget targets for this fund, we try to target a 2/3, 1/3 mix. That is 2/3, we try to limit replacement to 2/3 of this budget so that we can squeeze as much innovation as we can. I'll say that percentage has grown, that innovation percentage has grown, and this year we spent just over $1 million in these 3 innovation categories. It's the most we spent in the 5 years in those categories since we passed the referendum, even though the amount of revenue has dropped over that same period of time. In the innovative classroom technologies, those are the technologies that go into classrooms like smart boards, like document cameras, like sound enhancement systems. The bulk of that money is distributed directly to schools, so principals have a team that leads their technology initiatives. A portion of that money goes directly to that team, and then that team can decide who's ready for a smart board next, and so on. How should that money be spent? We've made that transition, and what we found, and in addition, we've allowed buildings to turn some of their replacement money over to innovation, and we found that they're doing that in, to large extent. The curriculum instruction and assessment portion, that $462,000, that is dedicated to those departments, those efforts that are going through the curriculum cycle. So the bulk of that money in 12-13 went to the a reading initiative called the New Literacy Project, which is in middle and high schools, iPad project with middle and high school students. The third category, future of online learning, is the areas that you've heard me talk about before: flipped education, hybrid learning. Those are fairly mature efforts, and so most of that $75,000 is not equipment-based. It's really about supporting staff. Overall, then, that gives you that template of how that current revenue is spent. This is just the same slide that you've seen before, which is the desired implementation of the Next Technologies for Learning budget. The three category areas there: digital content and personal devices, the anytime, anywhere learning, and then student, family, school collaboration. The dollar values spread over a 5-year period. The total cost of that 5-year expenditure is $20.4 million when you include the infrastructure cost, and that works out to be about $4.1 million per year. Comparatively, that is compared to our current $2.7 million a year. Fourth category is about support. How will we support these different audiences, the teachers? How will we support families? How will we support students? This slide points at a couple of the objectives under what I would call a teacher boot camp or a student boot camp. The student boot camp is a little more literal. It's where our experience with the one-to-one programs across the 3 middles was, if teachers carved out a bit of their day when students received their computers and we approached or we addressed these items that you see on the right, it created an efficiency in the one-to-one program that paid off in multiples as they continued to move forward. The efficiency of how homework gets handed out and handed in, that's the workflow, what to do when the device breaks down, what to do when you need charging, how to take care of the device. The items on the left, the teacher boot camp, isn't a literal boot camp, but it's more the objectives that need to be met to get teachers ready for this initiative. We have a variety of supports in place to support teachers. We have professional, in my opinion, strong professional development supports in our district. A large portion of that is site-based, so Andy's team decides how to support his teachers to a great extent. We have media directors and we have CTs who support staff in a multitude of ways that we would get together with. The media directors meet on Wednesday, and the topic of conversation is this: how will we support teachers and students in a one-to-one environment? We're talking about, in this teacher area and the staff and student support area, providing some staffing in the 2 years of implementation for at any level. So at the 2 years of implementation at a middle school, settings or putting some money aside to get a teacher out of the classroom part-time to provide that in-school support, so it's not all central office based. Overall, the teacher and student support budget is about $900,000 worth of support in terms of time, release time for staff who can't necessarily come to an after-school event, as well as curriculum supports. I wanted to have Andy talk a little bit about, his specialty, which is the Valley View Elementary Parent Academy, and anything else with regards to his previous experience with one-to-one, and anything else you want to talk about.
Thank you. I would start by talking about when I was at the middle school with Ben McGrath, and you have to pardon me, I'm making my way through a cold here, so I apologize. In the work that we did at Valley View around the one-to-one technologies, and I think John alluded to it, and I'd like to capitalize on the comment. John and I were part of a group who went to Seattle to watch a one-to-one initiative that was promoted there, and one of the takeaways there were many takeaways, but one that resonated with me was First of all, the preparation that was done before that school district let the one-to-ones out, and I'm seeing the same thing being modeled here. So that's very exciting for me to know that there's a lot of forethought going into this. I think there are other school districts who have done this, maybe not thinking about what they should have been thinking about, and this is just exciting to know that all this work is being done. The second part of that, what I picked out of our Seattle visit was what John alluded to, what happened at Valley View, which is you had this routine of efficiency that where teachers and students understood the ground rules, if you will, of what the one-to-one was, what you could do, what you couldn't do, when they should be open, when they shouldn't be open. I still remember, the buzzword was computers at 45. And what that meant was your screen as a student went to 45 because the teacher's talking. So all these little things that manifest out of the initiative on the ground, if you will. From the Parent Academy piece, now that I'm at the elementary school, if you've heard me, if you've come to talk to me or listened to me before, I talk a lot about building capacity. And building capacity in staff members is huge with me, and it's, again, refreshing to see in the slide that there is provisions being made and plans being made to build the capacity of staff members to make sure that they've got the training and the things that they need. Building capacity in students, that's something that's dear to my heart. To tie two worlds together, last year we did an internet safety class at Valley View as a precursor to some of this work. And the phrase that I stole when I was in Washington doing some work was, our parents didn't tell us, don't cross the street, they taught us how to cross the street. And I think it's the same thing with the internet, that with kids, we can't tell them stay off it unless we're watching. We have to teach them how to cross the street, if you will, how to be digital citizens. That capacity thread leads right over to our Parent Academy, where philosophically, with the Valley View community, I think it's extremely important at the ground level with 4-year-olds and 4-year-old families that we're building capacity to be successful. And it's a strong belief of mine that the internet is, and the access to the internet is something that levels the playing field. I would say anecdotally that many of our families, many of our students have some kind of access to the internet, but I would say the one thing that we don't have is consistent access to the internet. And I think consistency is huge when you need to count on something for homework or to get a project done. The other thing is timing. And John alluded to this earlier. You might have timing when mom's not using her phone. You might get on her iPhone and do it, but if she's busy and you need it now, you don't have that. So what's exciting about this initiative and building the capacity at the Valley Views, and Kennedy for that matter, as we articulate forward, is just being able to have consistency, a shared thought about what should be done with this information and with this access, as well as the timing to make sure that kids have that. The other piece of consistency for me that excites me about this is having a similar tool in students' hands is also, I think, a very important thing. I think that, when we all learned how to write, I remember the teacher gave us those big fat red pencils, and we all used those pencils because that's what the teacher knew how to instruct with. That's what the teacher knew that would help us developmentally. Yes, we had other pencils and markers at home that we practiced with for a long time, but to have consistency in instruction was huge for us when we were doing that, and I think it's the same to be said here. And so I think that's another important part. Back to the Family Academy, though, we're going to go forward with any kind of internet access information for our families who come to make sure that that's a part of the curriculum we deliver for our families so that the playing field is leveled with consistency and timing of the access. So I'm excited about this.
Thanks. All right, now, if you could, bring the Chromebook forward. I'm going to walk you through a few things. You can certainly follow along. You know what I used to do when I would instruct groups, and it would be this hands-on portion. I would say, if you run into a problem, talk to your neighbor first, so that the rest of the class can keep moving. You're welcome to just follow along if you want. You can have that, actually. I'm going to walk you through some of these items that you see on the overhead. What we would consider some of the main advantages of having a digital curriculum combined with a device, combined with access, and combined with good data. So let me launch.
Is that password case sensitive?
Oh yeah, the password is case sensitive, and I'll just tell you it was chosen at random, so the 4-letter word doesn't reflect upon you at all.
Yeah, I kind of like mine.
Except in your case. The home screen that you should get when you open up the device, we've preset these for you. We're a little bit of a disadvantage because you would go through some training and so on as a student. If you don't see this home screen, I'm going to try to mimic on this computer here what we're doing. You can follow along, just follow along with the overhead if you want. The home screen that you should come up should look something like this. There, in the toolbar, you might click the home button if you don't see it. There is a home button up there. And you'll notice that items in this Google Chrome environment, as they do in most internet environments, open in tabs. So as you open one tab, you might close that tab to go back and navigate back and forth. So I want to talk about these 4 areas, which I think are interesting. One of the takeaways I'm hoping you get from this experience is that the Chromebook itself is no big deal. If you're familiar with a laptop, if you've used the internet, then this experience is not terribly new. Oh, I should tell you that a mouse plugs into this. So if the trackpad is unfamiliar, you can unplug the mouse from your laptop and plug it in. It plugs into the back of this device. The first area I want to talk about is customization. That is what a digital textbook looks like. So we have a couple of examples of a digital textbook. One of those I want to look at is this Algebra 2 Moodle course. So these are 2 Jefferson teachers, John Anderson and Scott Cater. This is a demo course. If you get prompted here, you might have to click to log in as a guest. But this is an actual course that they teach out of. This is a copy of it, so we don't have any real student data in here. And I would consider this a look at a bridge textbook. So they teach Algebra 2. This happens to be the picture on the cover of that textbook. Along the left-hand side, very familiar are the chapters of that textbook. And if I click on Chapter 5, this is a straight PDF right out of that textbook, page for page, copied. What it means for students is they don't have to carry the 14-pound textbook. They have it here. Any place they have access to the internet, not only with this device, because it's not just on this device, it's on the internet, tied to their password, they have access to their math homework. Students are excited about having access to their math homework. I'm just kidding. It's varying degrees of excitedness about that. If you want to go a little bit further, we talked about the RAP model, which is replacement, amplification, transformation. It's this kind of continuum of what happens when you try to adopt a new technology into an area. Replacement means the thing that you did new with the technology looks a lot like the thing that you did before, only you're doing it with a new device. That online textbook that I just showed you is sort of in that replacement area. It really is PDFs of the original textbook. The next stage in this continuum is amplification. So we're talking about being able to do things, manipulate that content in a way that you can't do with the traditional textbook. That course that you saw bridges over there a little bit because embedded in that course is online quizzes, the ability for a student to take the quiz online as opposed to taking it in pencil and paper format, and the ability to get access to that textbook from anywhere, anytime. If you go a little bit farther down that continuum to transformation, we're talking about a textbook that doesn't look like a textbook any longer. So if you click on the 6th grade Minnesota Studies, this is an open source textbook that's being used, piloted right now by our 6th grade teacher at Valley View Middle School, and it's the Minnesota Geography course. It was done by a collection of teachers out of District 287. Some of our Bloomington teachers participated. All of the contents of this textbook are free and open available resources on the internet. And you can see it doesn't have the traditional flow of a textbook, no page numbering, but it has some of the common characteristics. So I'll just point to a couple of those right now. If I scroll down a little bit under the early indigenous populations, some of these items are straight on text. You click on an area, you just read and you talk and you work your way through some pretty straightforward information. One of the unique parts of this text, though, is when you hover over some of the words that are highlighted, that you get a question mark. So unlike a traditional textbook, I can click on petroglyphs, and I get to see a definition of what is a petroglyph again? And I can see immediately what a petroglyph is. If I go back, the textbook in this case comes to life a little bit more in that the second link there is a video. So instead of talking about or showing pictures of the Jeffers petroglyph, I can actually take a little virtual field trip. Slightly more interesting than reading about it in a text. And then some of the other things should look familiar. Anything with a globe on it is an internet resource, could be a collection of links from various sources. There is some traditional Word documents in here. There's some PowerPoint documents. You can click on any of those and open them and take a look. So again, that continuum of taking a traditional text, moving some of its contents directly, building a bridge to a textbook that looks sort of like a modern textbook, built on the assumption that every student has a digital device and has access to get to that digital device. The second of these strong reasons for digital content is about the flexible use of time. You heard me talk about Jessica Rice's flipped classroom. Last time I was here, this is an actual pointer to her current work. So this work was due on Friday, April 5th. I'll just give you a quick walkthrough of how that assignment works. On the left is Jessica's video.
This is video 552, and the goal of this video is to solve trigonometric equations in
And
quadratic form.
There's Jessica.
So quadratic form.
If you scroll through, she walks through on her smartboard, has pressed the record button and has recorded about a 14-minute lesson that she did deliver probably in person. I don't know, I haven't talked to her. But she also recorded it here so that it's saved for families, it's saved for students who weren't there, it's saved for anybody else who wants to come back and review it. Toward the end of this video, I want
Again, similar to the factoring
to
problem.
scroll to the end. At the end of each of her videos,
Solve the equation for all solutions to try and
she pauses and asks two questions of students. A multiple choice question in which you use the skills that you've just learned to answer a multiple choice question, and then a free response question. On the right side of her website is a form. It's an actual interactive form. Student fills out, chooses what period they're in. Here's the multiple choice answer. Was it A, B, C, or D? It's just a quick way to check for formative assessment, to check for your understanding of the content. Could you explain your answers? So math often gets challenged as a place. It's tough to do online work because of the show your work aspect. Here's where you would explain how you got that answer, and then here's the free response questions. It's great to demonstrate, but let's look at what the data looks like. So if I close this, you have access to this data link as well. Here's the results of one of those assignments, one of those nightly assignments. This happens to be video 4.3.1, so a chapter or two back. I'll just walk you through this data set. The timestamp shows that it was from December of last year. It's interesting here, you can see at what time students submitted the data. So what time did they fill out the form? 8:23, it happens to be AM, this is military time. But then I scroll down here, here's one as late on that day as 21:41. 21:51, that's 11:51 at night. Somebody submitted this data. We've blacked out the names in the second two columns. We happen to know that the multiple choice answer is here. The correct answer is A, and most students answered A. Here's the rationale that students submitted. Here's the free response question answer. Here's the follow-up question that a student might have. What I can do with this data, or what Jessica can do with this data, or any teacher is, let's eliminate those that got the correct answer. So this, I think it'll be reflected on your screen if you're on this page. I filtered out all the correct answers. And so what I'm looking at now is all those students who did the homework, who had some misunderstanding and answered incorrectly, and that helps prepare for the next day's lesson. Do I need to do a lot of review, a little review, or do I just need to talk to these 5 kids? Another feature that Jessica incorporates is here on the right. She asks, If you have a question that you want follow-up, put your email address on the form. One student here did that. She wrote a response. The question was, do you have extra practice sheets that I can work on? She wrote a response. The teacher wrote a response. This happens to have a little piece of logic behind it that when she clicks it, it automates and sends an email. And then it can be noted here that an email was sent to the student in reply to that question. So when we talk about doing things, teaching differently, we're talking about the efficient use of data and the different use of data and the ways teachers and students can interact when they have this instant formative results. The last area I want to talk about is the connected tools and resources. So some of the more interesting components of a device like this is what technologies it can add that we don't already have. So a couple of those have been pre-installed for you. There are two little icons up in your toolbar. I'm pointing to them here. I'll circle them. One of them allows me to do this. It allows me to highlight a piece of text, like I'll highlight this paragraph, and click on the speaker. You may not want to do this with me.
Digital tools allow students and teachers to work together like never before. Collaboration gives students multiple avenues for clarification and questions, as well as helps prepare them for life outside of and after their time in Bloomington Public Schools.
So that was an on-the-fly reading from a voice at Google of that paragraph. No preparation. The plugin is there. Any text that you have in front of you that you can highlight, you click on the speaker and it can be read to you. So pretty powerful tool, very simple, no added cost to us. Another powerful added tool, imperfect as it is the next icon, which is a translation tool. If you click on it, this page might not be as interesting as some others, but if you click on it, it will take this existing page and it'll ask at the top, do you want this page translated? What language do you want it translated to? I'm just going to choose a common language for us like Spanish. I'll be the first to say this is not a perfect translation. When I click the translate button, the feedback we get from our Spanish speakers is this is an imperfect translation. My message to that is an imperfect translation related to no translation is far better. And so where we can't have humans translate all of what we do, this is a pretty good stand-in. So again, no pre-preparation for this page. You can navigate yourself to any other page, including the Star Trib or Encyclopedia Britannica or any of those other sites. Click on that translate icon, as any student could do, or any parent of any student who's not a native English speaker, translate and have a meaningful conversation about what's going on with that content. The one interesting twist on that idea is, let's do the reverse. Do we want to know what how other cultures view us? Let's go to a Spanish newspaper, click on the translate feature and translate that Spanish newspaper into English and then read what is being said in a newspaper in Mexico City online about an article that relates to your or I's life. So those are some of the, what I wanted to get out of that experience is a couple of things. Number one, you get a little bit of hands-on time with the device. There's nothing spectacular about it. It works and operates much like a laptop. Students who are familiar with laptops have a very quick ease of transition. It doesn't install software. You can't install any you can't install any games, but you also can't install Word, you can't install any other programs. If you looked at one of those textbooks, you saw some Word icons, you saw some PowerPoint icons. One of the great powers of Google Docs is it translates all those icons. So the PowerPoint tools or presentations that teachers have spent years and years developing, when they post them into the Moodle environment and they click on them, a student clicks on them here, it opens up in a web page that's viewable. Much like this presentation, it didn't originate in PowerPoint, but the translation back and forth between PowerPoint and Google Docs is now pretty seamless. So those are the 4 experiences: using time in a flexible way, taking a richer look at data and the immediacy of data for teachers and students. I missed one important feature, which is collaboration. So if you're still on this page and you scroll to the very bottom, there's the area of collaborating with other students and teachers. This is a process we've incorporated in some of our regular meetings, academic services, and in my own department when I have what we call the technology and communications meeting every month. We're in this room, we have about 25 people, we take all our notes in a collaborative space. If you click on that link, you'll open up a doc, and lo and behold, there's everybody's names. If you click into one of those cells, the instructions here are pretty straightforward. This is a proof of concept, so school board digital content reflection in the space next to your name. Please type a question or comment you have. So there, Arlene she's doing it without even using her finger.
New feature.
So I can prompt with, what 3, and you should be seeing it on your screen, words come to mind. And this is an interactive feature that, teachers employ with their students. This is group 1. I've created 5 of these documents for the 5 groups in my class. This is the space where we will collectively take notes that will combine into a group presentation. And anyone who's invited into the doc can add. And you can see there as people move their cursor around, who's green. Green is Nellie. Blue's Tim. So you can't drop into somebody else's space. I saw what you were doing, Mr. Culver. Okay, let's go back then. So again, the 5 areas I wanted to talk about or dig a little deeper were these 5 areas. Talk a little bit about communications, the importance of communication, what we've done, what we want to build on. Talk a little bit more about internet access, our proof of concept with the work at the Georgetown apartment complex and the bridge that Nelson can help us build there. Talk about review the current referendum spending, how we're supporting students, staff, and families, and then give you this hands-on Chromebook experience. The last reminder before I ask you for questions is, these last 2 milestones or these mileposts that we're going to go through in the next month. April 29th, this is also from the last presentation, is the security audit. These puzzle pieces fit together, and that following the security audit by Rick Kaufman will be a resource presentation by Rod Zivkovich to talk about the resources available for various projects. And then May 13th, technology, security, and finance will come here. 3 of us will come here in tandem to talk about that next process. So with that, any questions for us? I'll do a couple more things. I lost half my audience. We have a couple other people in the audience. Brian Ingeman said he would come. Ben McGrath. These guys are enthused because they're first in line. We have done good work at the middle schools in terms of the one-to-one pilot. If we look at the way this plan rolls out, it's going to be at the middle schools first. And so some of that prep work starts before day 1. It starts before a student gets a computer. And so they're already laying that groundwork amongst their staffs and amongst their students. And so I invited them to come in case you have questions for them too, since they're sort of on the front line of this. Tim is here as well from Academic Services to talk about any of the follow-up questions. Chris is over there as well to talk about Academic Services questions. So with that.
Yes. Director Hibbs.
So, a couple of questions. One is, in earlier presentations, you noted that, we are able to track when kids are on and, what time of day they're accessing the Moodles and so forth.
Yeah.
Do we have that data on an individual basis? In other words, do you know, Mark Hibbs is on at 3 o'clock in the morning?
Depends on the tool. So if you're logged in and you take an action in some tools, like you edit a document, that document is flagged in the history that Mark Hibbs edited this collaborative presentation at 3:30 in the morning on this date. The quality that adds is it shows who's participating throughout that process. So if I'm a teacher and I want to check on who's participating, I can look at that edit history, and it's also a nice fail-safe. If something happens, something goes awry, between group members, you can dial back to any point in that history. So, we've had instances where one group member disagrees, and as sometimes happens, you have to dial back and say, okay, we're gonna go back to this point and then move forward again as a group.
Well, I'm asking that question because I had a community member ask me about data privacy issues and if, what kind of concerns we have about knowing this student was working on this document at this time. I mean, I don't know, but I thought it was a good question because I'm sure people might have some concerns that way, and I'm wondering.
So where data privacy comes into my realm is, a lot of the data for the district flows through my department, and so I get asked these types of questions. Generally, we say that among school professionals, like myself or like a teacher, you have a large degree of access to information about your students. Certain systems administrators have a wider degree of access because they administer the very systems that are used. They administer the mechanics like the email system or like the servers or so on. So we have a small number of people who have access to people's email, have access to the email system. We have, to a smaller extent, teachers have access to a large degree of their students' data. If the collaborative process, in the example that I used, if you go in and edit a document at 3:30 in the morning, the only people who can see that piece, that snippet of data, would be the people that document is shared with. So it's your group members and your teacher. Hopefully you're sharing your work with your teacher. And then the system administrator. So if we need to do some sort of intervention, we have access to that data. So it's, we try to set the right barriers for the right level of access.
Okay. I think in the past, we had some network reliability issues. I haven't been aware of that in the last, however many years. But this would seem to raise the bar on the reliability of the network as well as the availability of the network. And so are we going to have to plan maintenance and, replacing servers and things around like that around the school calendar?
Well, we do network reliability has gotten much better everywhere as tools have gotten better, as equipment's gotten more reliable. We do regular upgrades of our network, so I have strong confidence in the reliability of our network. We schedule those changes, those upgrades around non-school times, but you do have to make network upgrades by replacing equipment here and there. So there is downtime. I'm pretty highly confident in our network, so I don't think that that will be an issue. With regard to this particular initiative, we are investing in network infrastructure and wireless infrastructure starting right now. We have a map being drawn of our 5 secondary schools to give us a cost estimate of building a more robust wireless infrastructure that puts us on par with our wired infrastructure. So what we're building toward is the equivalent of a single access point per classroom. Given the top-end potential that every classroom will have 30 students, and all of those 30 students will have a device on, and they'll all be on the internet. And that's the wireless network that we're building on. So we're making those investments. We continue to make regular investments, but that's the current investment that we're making in preparation for this effort.
It seems like it really, though, raises the bar for network reliability because at some point, we aren't going to have paper textbooks anymore. So, if for some reason the network goes down and it's down for a couple of days, some catastrophic equipment failure, unless we've got redundancy, redundant equipment so that it can slide in, aren't kids going to be out of luck because they won't be able to access their...
They would be out of luck, and so we do have redundancy plans. We have emergency backup plans. We have contracts with our service support for networking equipment. Our network, you know, when we look at that $1.7 million of infrastructure, a portion of that, $400,000 of that is networking infrastructure. It includes, you know, some mundane things like fiber changes that need to be made between buildings or in closets, but it also includes switches and service contracts that allow for technicians to be on site almost immediately. So the same way that we rely heavily on electricity, because if electricity goes down for 2 days, the school can't function, we have a backup generator. We have those kind of reliabilities built in. We have battery backups that let our networking closets run up to 8 hours without power. We have a generator on the back of a semi-trailer that can be plugged into any of our 3 main networking closets. So if this building, for instance, were to get flooded and electric wasn't coming up in 2 days, we'd back up a diesel generator, plug it into the building, and it would power the network closet, among other things, so that the rest of the district remains unaffected. So we put those kind of catastrophic layers of backup in place.
Okay. And the last question I have, you know, when we redid all these buildings, you know, these projectors were new technology. And one of the things that I heard going around to schools at that time was teachers, to a varying degree, are integrating that technology into their lessons. You know, some really embraced it, and others were kind of like, I don't know. So it seems like we're looking at a fairly sizable investment here, and really changing the model of teaching. And I guess, what are the plans to, and I'll use the word ensure, although lawyers and engineers don't like to use that word, what are the plans to ensure that all the teachers will be, you know, ready to use this technology right out of the gate?
So I think that I would lean on my academic services friends, but I'll speak for them, and they can add any comments. You know, as we make any change in our system, we have to build supports in for staff. And so in this particular change, we're talking about not immediately dropping our textbooks and putting them in a storage closet and never going back to them. We're talking about building a bridge whereby we have a math textbook for every student right now who takes Algebra 2. We can put those books on the shelf, and those students who still want to take that textbook home or keep a copy of it at home so they can use the digital resources at school still have it. As we buy new materials, we buy digital licenses for those new materials. So we've actually done that for 2 years now, buying both print materials and digital materials. So we're actually a few steps onto that bridge. The next step might be to not buy a full textbook for every student, but to buy a classroom set. So a teacher has 30 in the classroom for the multiple sections that they teach. And then the final step of that bridge is to go to a digital resource.
Thank you.
Other questions? Director Bergstrom.
Well, first let me say thank you for coming tonight. Appreciate the presentation. I appreciate your passion. I couldn't let this pass, but you were talking about redundant systems, and I see 3 up front, and we got the backup crew right back there. So I know we're in good hands. Thanks for coming. Ben, Brian, Jim back there. Nelson, thanks for coming. My question is a concern. I want to make sure that I want to make sure that we're doing the best that we can to, if we put these in all the students' hands, that all the students have one, and that their access is, that they can use it. So, I mean, I'm hearing that in the presentation, but I just want to make sure that the kids have the opportunity to be as enthused as the presenters, to look at this and say, you know what, wow, I can spend more time doing math. You know, and this, I don't have to do it at school, now I can do it here at home, or in the study hall. Or Nelson, I apologize, I don't remember the name of the room, not Georgetown, but the room that you had it, there was a fun name for it.
Oh, homework hangout.
There you go, the homework hangout. Okay, I can go have a donut or some carrots, something healthy, and be safe and secure, and I have access to this. So I just want to make sure that we're not, that we're keeping our eyes on all the students.
Right.
So,
And, I would say to that the students are in the hands of these professionals. I'm one layer removed, and so where I get the opportunity to bring folks like this in, they can speak to how do you fine tune that support.
Might I just add, so part of the conversations we're having at Valley View as we continue to fly high is talking about transitions. And one of the transitions that we're talking about right now is, as a student comes in, as a family comes in September, they get an open house experience. That's very robust, and it's exciting, just like this presentation here. Well, what happens to the student who comes in on December 9th? What do they get? And so, we're having the conversation about they need to be provided, an equally robust experience to be excited about becoming a part of the Valley View Elementary family. Just sitting here listening as the leader of Valley View, I'm already thinking about what does this mean in 4 or 5 years when a student comes, to get them up to speed so that their accessibility, for someone who just moves in is equal as we can make it to someone who was there from day one. And so that's important to me as well. So I hear what you're saying, and I'm here to say that I'm on the same page.
Yes, Director Iblin.
Could you go with me, please, to the slide that says 2013-18 desired implementation? On the bottom down there, it says that
number 9.
it says that the 5-year cost is 4.1 per year, and right now we have 2.7 coming in. Where do we find the 1.4?
So I'm part of a larger organization, and one of the great pieces one of the great things I get to do is help create a vision for where we want to move this district, and then teammates help find how to find those resources.
Okay, can I address that then to somebody on the cabinet?
At the upcoming April 29th meeting, we'll be presenting a financing plan to the board.
But a referendum is a referendum. It comes from the will of the people. Where are you going to find 1.4 million without a referendum?
You haven't been around West long enough.
We have some reserves, but not enough to sustain us for the full period. So we would be looking at an option like a referendum.
Wow. Okay, next question. Go back one slide. 17% of the money goes to curriculum instruction and assessment. 17% of this money goes to Mark's concern of having staff trained to use this and implement it accordingly. Can you tell me why that number's so low?
Well, the orientation of this, how these funds are appropriated each year is flexible. Like I said, our guiding principle is that 2/3 of the money be restricted for replacement. That is, let's keep downward pressure on replacement costs so that they stay within 2/3 of our revenue. And we've done that successfully. 61% of it of these funds go toward replacement. That frees up about 1/3 of this money, or about $1 million, to go toward innovation. The goal of innovation is that it gets directly to students in the classroom. The larger committee of GATE, Group for the Advancement of Innovative Technology, then decides how should those resources, after you take out replacement, how should they be allocated? So the 3 big categories are innovative classroom technology, again, which is devices that go into the classroom to assist teaching, curriculum instruction and assessment, and future of online learning. The curriculum instruction instruction and assessment category, the premise of that category is any group of teachers that are, or a curriculum area that's going through the curriculum cycle. So in this year, it happened to be reading. That's why the bulk of that money went toward the reading initiative this year. Previous years, it was science, might have been language arts, next year might be math. So 17% of the overall 2.7, and this is on top of the regular curriculum resources. It's not instead of the original or the curriculum resources. So this is to do innovative things where technology meets that instructional area.
And then I have one completely different question. I've been, ever since this popped up in front of the board 6 weeks ago, I've been asking various people I know in the community who are just friends of mine and so forth. They've never heard of this innovation being considered by the board. Now, I realize that you gave us a historical background and you used the school pages and so forth. I went so far to ask the reporter from the Sun Current what he knew about it. I did that yesterday at our thing. And he had no idea what I was talking about. His first knee-jerk reaction was the I think it's Steve Searle experiment that's going on at Oak Grove Elementary. He thought that was what I was talking about. I says, no, I'm talking about $8 million, and it's not in Mr. Searle's classroom. So again, as a board, I'm concerned that we're acting on a big item here. Not that I'm against it, but the community doesn't know that we're even considering such a major curricular change. Any reaction to that?
You know, I would say again, this isn't, you know, if we look at the history, I'm limited in time to make this case, you know, in bits and pieces in front of the board. But if we look at the history of this evolution of technology in the classroom, this is part of that continuum that really started with the projectors that go into classrooms, online grade books, adding tools as they become available and feasible to the classroom environment to support good teaching. This is that what may feel like a revolutionary step, but I would say it's an evolutionary step. We all know that we're going to get to a place where every student has a personalized learning device, and that the main way that students are going to get content is on that device. The vast majority of college students have already gotten there. Many students are going there without us. They're going there by bringing in 40% of Jefferson students walk into that building with a device in their pocket that shows up on our wireless internet. 37% of Kennedy students walk in with a device that shows up on our internet. So students are going there, families are going there. We're trying to go there in a controlled way. And so when we package it up and we give it a title like Next Technologies for Learning, I totally understand that it feels like a new initiative, but really it's not. Really it's a continuation of some of the good work we've already done. The examples that we're showing are not examples that we would like, that we saw in Wisconsin someplace. They're examples of stuff that's happening in our classrooms right now that we want to build on and systematize. So where we can expand flipped learning and where we can expand online learning, we want to do it. Where we can take the John Anderson and Scott Cater's textbook bridge, we want to continue and build that bridge for other teachers who don't have the time or energy or know how to build that bridge for them. So, you know, if it weren't packaged as a new, as a wrapped up in a nice bow with a nice title, it would just be, we have the resources to move forward. This is how we're moving forward. We'd just like to report on our next steps. If the referendum that was passed in 2007, if the economy had worked out the way that all of us would like it to have worked out, our revenue this year would be somewhere around 4.0 million. And so we wouldn't be talking about a gap between the place we want to go and the place that we have resources to go. It's turned out that we haven't landed in that place. We've landed in a place where those resources have contracted, we still want to move forward with this effort. We need to figure out how to bridge that gap.
And last question I would have, back to that 2.7, that's what we're spending on an annual basis now.
Correct.
If we were to go ahead with this 4.1 concept, what happens to the 2.7 million that we have to spend things on, like that's listed here? I mean,
Yeah, so the items on this, it's a good question. The items that are on this chart are mostly absorbed inside of that 4.1 million. So that infrastructure cost,
yeah,
that's,
but you're not going to put in whiteboards, or not whiteboards, but smart boards and so forth. That's part of this right now. That's 533,000.
so the portion there that's 533,000, that includes smart boards, and it includes the professional development and support for those smart boards, plus other classroom tools. Those would continue. If you, at previous presentations, I brought some measurements of classroom tools that show how these classroom technologies are getting a larger and larger footprint, where we have 65% of our classrooms have smart boards now.
Well, then go to the next slide then, and tell me where in those 3 items there you'll find smart boards.
So you won't find them, you won't find the specific item smart boards in this area, but it's part of a larger package. What I wanted to say was that most of what you see here, all of the future of online and learning, all of the infrastructure costs are directly absorbed. The curriculum instruction and assessment cost this year, the 462,000, it was largely to put devices and give access to the reading curriculum folks. So of all of the things you see there, the item that would need to transform or be built or be figured out is smart boards, for instance. And it's not insignificant. It's $500,000 this year.
You know, sustainability is a big item too.
Right. I agree. As we go forward and evolve, we have those discussions, we have those conversations each year. Should an item like an e-beam, that used to be our standard for how teachers would create interactive content, should that remain an innovative technology? Well, at some point we sunsetted it. We said we'll continue to support this device, but we're moving in this new direction with this new device. So will we put, we don't have it in our plan to put a smart board in 100% of classrooms. We try to match the right tool with the right environment. The conversation in GATE is we see those classroom technologies plateauing in that the stampede of people who are wanting smart boards is gone down quite a bit. There's still people waiting in line at each building, but it's not the same need that where we were at 4 years ago. Because you look at the charts of classroom technologies, and all of them have gone up to a level of sustainability. That is, they're at the level where we're meeting the needs of the buildings, of the technology committees in buildings, and so on. So it's not an answer I have for you immediately, like how will we deal with smart boards next year, or 2 years from now, which is really when we're talking about this implementation. But we'll have multiple conversations between now and then to figure out how that puzzle piece fits in to this overall picture. And how these items will frankly evolve, or these items, I should say, items 1, 2, and 3 will evolve, expand or contract to allow what we continue to do, to build on what we're finding success in.
Thank you.
Yes, Director Hibbs.
I just wanted to say, Don, I think you're doing a great job. I don't want you to feel like we're shooting the messenger, but I do agree with Director Ablin that it does feel a little bit revolutionary to us. It maybe doesn't feel that way to you. I understand, your description of how it's part of a continuum, but I think for those of us that aren't living it every day, it feels like, a big deal, a big change in terms of the way kids are going to learn and the way teachers are going to need to teach, and it's going to come at a price tag, and so, those are the issues that are causing us a little consternation, but that shouldn't reflect upon you and how any of you feel sitting at that table, because, it's obviously where we need to head, but we're just not up to speed on whether it's the way we ought to get there.
Yeah, so I totally understand where you're coming from. You're part of a group that needs to make this very important decision, and, Dick and Lyle and Nellie came in as the newest board members, and we talked about topics around technology, and it really kind of made me think about, it's quite a complex topic, and it's hard sometimes to see the forest for the trees compared to the thousands of decisions that get made within a week or two period about how we move left and right. And so I feel, like I said, it's a little constrained to put an effort like this encapsulated inside of a presentation or two for a board meeting. So I welcome the questions. I don't take any offense at any of that.
Just have a comment.
Yes, Director Corman.
I'm sorry I was late for the presentation, for the beginning of the presentation. It's different. I was at an event. But I just want to say that because I have school-age kids and also very young kids, I know how important it is for all of our students to be able to have a device like this, like the Chromebook, because I see the need, especially with my 7th grader, she really needs to have her very own. And, as I see the kids growing up and getting into other upper grades, I can see how just having one computer at home is not going to work for everybody. And everybody needs to do homework the same day. So eventually everybody will need one of those. So I really like this idea of having the students get one, take one home, even though it kind of makes me nervous in terms of, those are going to be thrown all over the place and, some of those backpack fights that they get into. So that makes me very concerned. But I do see how effective this could be in terms of kids getting their assignments done and being able to communicate. I have to say, I see my daughter doing homework with another friend, just because they're using the same program. And they're using, I think it's Chrome, right, that they use, that they're able to communicate right at the same time. They're writing the same paper, just like that. Google Docs, yes. And so it's amazing to see the things that the kids can do. And even my kindergartner, benefits from having his own device and getting into those Rats Kids program websites and playing math and playing alphabet and sounds and all of that, making words. The only thing that I'm still concerned about is access. It's one of my big concerns because, well, if not everybody is able to have online access at home, then that means that they'll probably have to go somewhere else. And that might become a problem in terms of I might not always be able to go somewhere else to get my homework done because my parents are not at home, they cannot take me. Okay, I can walk, but what if we are in the middle of winter when it's so snowing, I cannot get out of the house. My daughter, there's times when she's still doing homework at 10 in the night. She cannot go somewhere at that time. So I will be concerned about safety for the kids if that is the case. If we don't have access in every single house, then what is going to happen if some of the kids have to go somewhere to get that kind of access? In one comment, and I'm sure you guys are going to take care of that once this all starts, you were so kind to let me take one of those home. Try it on my 7th grader. And she wanted to access her algebra homework, and she couldn't. And it's something that she can only do in her Mac, that she couldn't do it in this. So just want to make sure that everything is in place for them to be able to access those sites, even though it's not a Mac. So.
Right. So I don't know the specific situation, but we're talking about between the approval point and the rollout that we would build that digital backpack so that we would get rid of those barriers between the curriculum content and the device. So I don't know what particular program it was on the Mac. It might have been as something as simple as account management, where you need a certain account to do a certain thing, something like that. Regarding your other concerns, I know that access is one of those very tough issues. You know, we would absolutely regard, you know, no teacher is going to ask a student to walk out in a blizzard to finish their homework. So I think we're trying to address multiple ways, including offline access, where you can start a doc on this without access, and then also any paper materials. You know, some of those individual problems really have to be solved between student and teacher to find out what accommodations need to take place to deal with the specific need. As you know, students come with a variety of needs and wants, and so we have a very talented teaching staff that makes those decisions every day. This is just another one of those decisions they're going to make about whether the device worked last night or it didn't work last night, or whether the homework was available or not available.
Mhm. But are we teachers going to be able to actually accommodate the needs of the kids that are having issues? Like, I'm sure we're going to have a transition period where it's going to be a little bit, you know, chaotic. I teach French, and I have an online book that all of my students can access. But sometimes I have issues with this access book, with this online book, because when the kids do their homework there, sometimes when I go back to check on them, sometimes the system registers that and sometimes it doesn't. So I have to start all over again and almost do everything in paper, or, you know, kind of spend a lot of time trying to identify which students I couldn't get in my system. And that creates a lot of extra, and I'm thinking I'm only talking about 75 students, but if I was a teacher who has over 100 students, 200 students, then is this gonna create a problem for me? Is this gonna take extra time in my time when I could be teaching and maybe dedicating more of my teaching time to my students? You know, I just have those kind of
Right.
concerns that I share with
I hear what you're saying.
I thank you for bringing information to us again and move the conversation along for, as you said, was it step 3, or what did you refer to it as? The third iteration of
Not a
what it
12-step.
is we're hearing. And obviously from Director Ablin's feedback now as well, it still is not an information or a proposal or technique, whatever you might want to summarize, that has really permeated perhaps the community and even our educational community to as great an extent as it might, because it's coming up as a new concept people want to know more about what the implications are. So I congratulate you on doing what you have done in order to pull together groups and get their feedback and present the ideas and get people thinking about this universe that we're discussing. And my feedback would be my greatest concern is the all-encompassing nature of what's being proposed. And I think it's a very important step that we need to consider as to whether that does have application to all students at all times, at all grade levels at the inception. That is, I just came from teaching a class of second graders today. The idea of their feeling responsible enough to log in and do 9.9 section 8 problems at homework and bring it back tomorrow, my confidence level would be rather low that they'd be prepared to do that. So is that the appropriate grade level? Is that the wrong subject? Is it something where the Chromebooks are on a shelf and they bring it out and they work on it in class until they get in that habit? Do we need some transition time? And I'm sure you have some answers to some of those questions, because we would not be the first district to ever attempt to do this kind of rollout. But whether it has been more successful phased in, or for certain subject areas, or in some kind of a focused way over a shorter period of time, I don't know curricularly what the best way is to introduce it. especially if we have some concerns for students who are at a disadvantage and students who don't have the kind of parental engagement or community support that we think is important for success. And I believe that research would show that they are much less likely to be doing work at home. Rather, they need that one-to-one in the classroom in order to provide that motivation for them to be keeping at speed rather than falling behind because of an expectation they're accessing work on non-school hours when they're not. That's not where their focus is. But again, I'm sure this is nothing that you haven't heard and thought of before, and I'll be interested in the further conversations where I can become more informed about what the opportunities are. Anyone else have any comments or questions at this time? Otherwise, we'll move ahead to the next item on our agenda. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.